RFJ's Comic Book Reviews. I know that I've been gone for the past 2 weeks, but if you follow the show on Facebook, you'll see why. If you still haven't followed the page, go to facebook.com/RFJS Comic Book Reviews and give the page a like. This week I bring you a very special episode to make up for the past 2 weeks that I missed. Instead of reviewing The Amazing Spider-Man number 3, we will be discussing the recent MCU film that came out, Ant-Man, starring Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, the second Ant-Man. Spoiler warning, before you watch the video any further, I will be discussing exactly what happens in the film. Now, I'm not critiquing the film itself, I'm just discussing the comic book elements and giving you a better foundation, so if you do go see the movie for the first time, you have an idea of what you're seeing, or if you've already seen it, you have a better understanding of what you saw. So this is your spoiler warning. And if you've already seen it, let's continue. We open up on this film with the original Ant-Man, Dr. Henry Pym. He's very angry and he goes to Howard Stark, who is still alive at this point, and he sees that they've been trying to recreate his Pym particles. Now, Pym particles are something that Dr. Henry Pym created that allowed him to change his size, and of course he called them Pym particles after himself. Dr. Henry Pym, the Ant-Man, first appeared in a 7-page solo cover story called The Man in the Anthill. What happens in the original story is that he discovers the formula on how to create his Pym particles and he accidentally shrinks himself. And this comic is more about him trying to escape these ants and other creepy crawlies that are underground. It's kind of like a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So after we get this brief cameo from Haley Atwell as Agent Peggy Carter and the Howard Stark character and now the young Henry Pym character, we move into modern day and we see Scott Lang about to be released from prison. His whole story has been changed around for this movie, but it still retains the Scott Lang we know. The only thing they changed are very minor little details. In Scott Lang's origin story, he only turns to burglary after his career as an electronics expert starts failing and he needs to support his family. In the comics, he goes to work for Stark International after he's released from prison. In the movie, though, after he's released from prison, he just goes to work at Baskin Robbins and eventually just goes back to being a burglar. In the comics, he goes back to burglary because his daughter Cassie Lang is seriously ill and he needs some way to support her illness, whereas in the movie he turns back to burglary to make money because without money his ex-wife is not letting him see his daughter. In the comics, Scott Lang steals the original Ant-Man's costume. He breaks into Cross Technological Enterprises and he discovers that Dr. Erica Sondheim, the only person who's going to be able to help out his daughter, is being held prisoner by Darren Cross. In the movie, Darren Cross is the former protege of Henry Pym, but in the original comics, he's just some guy that Scott Lang needs to take out to get a doctor for his daughter. I think I like the way the film portrayed this scenario better. It works. In the film, when we're first introduced to Darren Cross, he's trying to find the secret to shrinking human beings. He knows that there was such a thing as Pym particles, but Dr. Henry Pym, Hank, won't give up the secret because he doesn't want this to get out. In his own words, which he'll say later on in the film, is that yes, the Iron Man suit is powerful, but it's just a piece of technology. Pym particles can change the face of science as it is. As we'll see later, it can let someone go into the quantum realm. This is something that's just revolutionary. When we see Darren Cross watching the original Ant-Man footage of him fighting in the Cold War overseas, Darren Cross will say the phrase, "tales to astonish." This line went over the heads of most of the people in the theater that I was in. Actually, both times I went to see the film, it just went over the heads of everyone. I didn't see one person react to this line, but you'll know it from here. Tales to Astonish was the name of the comic that Ant-Man first appeared in. Like I told you earlier, the story itself was called The Man in the Anthill, but the comic was called Tales to Astonish. This was Tales to Astonish number 27, and this, again, was January of 1962. Janet Van Dyne, the original Wasp, doesn't appear. She appears in a few flashback scenes, but the reason she doesn't appear in the movie is because she's dead. We'll find out later that she's not actually dead. She's stuck in the quantum realm. And as we're told at least 3 times in the words of Henry Pym, when you're in the quantum realm, everything that has to do with time and space pretty much stops. So if they were to find her, she might very well be the same age or very lightly aged from the point she went in. She won't be the same age as Dr. Henry Pym. She'll look almost exactly like she did when she went into the quantum realm. Hope Pym, who is the daughter of Hank and Janet Van Dyne. We see at the end of the film that she is going to get her own costume and she will be the new Wasp. A cool scene that happens is when Scott Lang, as the Ant-Man, goes to what Henry Pym remembers as Stark Industries, and not only that, but just an old abandoned Stark Industries. And when he gets there, if you saw the ending of the previous Avengers Age of Ultron, you'll start to kind of notice the outline of the building, and when he goes down, you go immediately, hey, that's Avengers Tower that they remodeled in the last film. And when Ant-Man gets to the bottom, he's almost immediately greeted by the Falcon. We get a very cool fight scene between Ant-Man and the Falcon, and at first you kind of go, how useful is Ant-Man's shrinking power? How useful would he even be in a fight? Would he be able to hold his own? And you can see here that, yes, he can very much hold his own. With the ability to shrink in size and regrow almost immediately, he can get out of any kind of grab that someone's trying to get him into, and when he needs it, he can grow back to full size and follow up his punch with his full body. And he's a very capable fighter. Hope has trained him well. I do have to say, this is my favorite MCU film that has come out. If you have not went to see The Ant-Man, you should definitely go watch it. And if you already have seen The Ant-Man, do what I did and go watch it again. It's a fantastic movie, and you'll see things that you didn't notice before. Scott Lang, the Ant-Man. What exactly can he do? Well, in the comics, Scott Lang is an electronics expert. With the Ant-Man costume on, he can manipulate his size. He can become very tiny. He can also communicate with higher level intellect insects, but he most commonly uses ants. His helmet has a retractable plexiglass face shield which he can pull down over the exposed parts of his face, and it starts pumping in a limited supply of air. He also has the ability to shrink to submicroscopic size and enter the subatomic universes. In the film, we see him with the ability to shrink down to the size of an ant. We see him eventually go into the quantum realm, and we see that he still has his electronics expert training. He is also combat trained. So if he stayed after the credits, you got to see Hank Pym give his daughter Hope the Wasp outfit. She didn't put it on, but if we get a Ant-Man 2, hopefully we'll see it. But if you stayed for the real after credit scene, which is literally after the entire credits roll, you see Bucky with his arm stuck in some kind of machine, and Steve Rogers, Captain America, talking with the Falcon, and they're trying to figure out a way to get his arm out of there. They ask if they can use Iron Man, but according to some kind of accords, he cannot help. I think that the Ant-Man is going to come help. We saw towards the end Falcon asking around for the Ant-Man because he's very interested in the fact that he can manipulate his size. So when the Falcon says that he knows a guy that can help. I know a guy. He's at the end of the Ant-Man film. He's obviously talking about Scott Lang, and I think he wants him to shrink the Winter Soldier's arm so he can get out of whatever's trapping him and get him out of there. Oh, you're still with me? Good. Let's talk about Civil War and how the Ant-Man fits in. I'm talking to those of you who are comic book fans. If you haven't read Civil War, go and read it. But this part of the video will be talking directly to you, the fans. As you remember in Civil War, the whole reason it happened is because Iron Man wants superheroes to register and use their real identities. Captain America sees this as a breach of freedom and doesn't think that heroes should have to register, and this is what causes the whole conflict, Iron Man versus Captain America. In the original, Mr. Fantastic is the one who is like the big dog, but as we all know, Fantastic isn't owned by Marvel Studios right now, and they can't be used, and as far as we know, no agreement has been reached, and I doubt anything is going on because they're doing their own movie right now. I think in the MCU universe, Hank Pym is going to take on the role of Mr. Fantastic. Why do I think this? Even though Hank Pym shows his dislike for Starks, we also see that there's a side of him that is very concerned about humanity, and I can see him siding with Iron Man if it comes down to superheroes registering. This is something that I can see Hank Pym getting behind. However, the Scott Lang that we're introduced to in the MCU is someone that will not be down for this. He's going to see this as a breach of freedom, and he's not going to want to do this. He is a criminal after all. Not a violent criminal, but he is someone who comes from a criminal background and who has reformed into a hero, and I can see him siding with Captain America on the fact that yes, he's a hero now. He shouldn't have to explain himself or register for something. He's doing good. But only time will tell, and I hope to see future MCU films that are as good as Ant-Man. If you read somewhere or hear from someone that Ant-Man wasn't good, I don't know what to tell you because I loved it. It is my favorite MCU film, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Bye.